One, going.
Well, good morning again from 1967beetle.com. I'm Jay Salser. I have a little video here to go along with an article I've written. This morning we're favored to have a Volkswagen specialist, a German Volkswagen specialist with us this morning, Frau Goring, and she's going to be observing and monitoring what we're doing this morning. If you read my July 3rd article, it was a discussion on the 1967 oil bath air cleaner. And during that discussion, we're talking about the different types, variants of the air cleaner. And we're also at the end talking about what happens to the crankcase vapors. And there's a new article going to come out with this video, and it's based on what I wrote in that discussion on July 3rd, which was, and I'll read, clean air standards were tightening in the USA. A primitive emissions control attempt already had been made in the years prior to and including 1967. And I think that happened about 1965. The hose from the oil filler to the air cleaner had been introduced. Its purpose was to recycle crankcase vapors into the air cleaner, then through the carburetor and intake system to be burned during combustion. Crankcase pressure, along with the vacuum created during the combustion process, introduced crankcase vapors into the air cleaner. Prior to the introduction of this, and most automobiles were subject to this, millions and millions of automobiles were now on the roads by 1967 and prior to 1967. Cities were growing, and people became concerned because not only did exhaust enter the atmosphere, the air which we breathe, but there were vapors coming out of the crankcase that were also entering the atmosphere. We fail most times to think about what's going on inside the engine, but there's a lot of churning of the oil. We all know there's oil inside the engine. There's a lot of churning of the oil by the crankshaft and by the camshaft, and the pistons going up and down are generating pressure. So there's a vapor created in there. What happened to the vapor prior to 1965? It just went out into the atmosphere. By 1965, including 1967 and later, there was a hose connected to the oil filler apparatus, which went to the air cleaner so that those vapors could be routed through the combustion system and be burned, and hopefully get rid of or reduce the oil vapors in the atmosphere. By 1968, of course, there were heavier restrictions placed upon all automobiles by the U.S. government, and there was more and more added until by the time 1979 came along, there were a lot of different emissions control. Now what I'm going to do is I want to do a simple test to see how much pressure is actually coming out of the engine to emit those crankcase vapors, and how much vacuum is created here by the air intake and the carburetor and combustion system that will draw those vapors into the air cleaner and thus into the combustion chamber. Now, in a discussion with David Brown, and this will be in the article in depth, he has, Brown is a now retired VW specialist trained by VW. He has an apparatus by which he can measure the output from the crankcase and the intake or vacuum created here at the air breather. We don't have that. So I'm going to do a very primitive test, and Glory is going to observe, I think, and we'll proceed with that. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to have to remove this hose, have no clamps on it because the hose fits immediately onto the two metal tubes, and there's no need for any clamps. So we're going to remove this. I'm going to lay it right down here. Now you can see the metal tube just below the oil filler cap here. This is where the fumes are going to be emitted, and they're going to be introduced into the air cleaner through this tube up here. Now, I'm going to pause very thin and waves in the air. And I'm going to put it here. Let's see. I can feel air coming out of the engine. I can feel the air coming right out of the engine here. We're going to put the paper up here. You can see it flapping. I try to hold it down, but it's not going to be held down. It's going to flap. So we have pretty good pressure coming out of the engine case. Now let's see what happens up here. Okay, we're getting a little suction here. It's going to hold that napkin up there not very well. So I have a smaller piece. We're going to put that on there.
Speak loudly.
It's going to hold that. So it's not much vacuum up here. David and I discussed that we have a lot of air going in here, and it's going to negate very much pressure vacuum at this point here. But we are getting some vacuum. It'll hold my paper up there. It'll hold the paper a little bit. Not very well. Yep. So there we've done our little primitive test, and we can see that there's quite a bit of pressure here. So very likely the pressure is enough to aid the weak vacuum to propel the crankcase vapor into the air cleaner, through the carburetor, through the intake manifold, and into the combustion chamber. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to 1967beetle.com. Thank you, Eric and Amanda Shoemaker, for making this possible.